When it comes to new car technology, there's always a race to see which car company will be the first to market. And the electric vehicle world, well, is no exception to that rule. A decade ago, the race was to see who would bring a long-range electric car to market first. That, and perhaps the race to see who would be the first to bring a sub $25,000 or equivalent car to market. We might not be doing all that well on the second of those. Technically, there are a few cars that just about satisfy that price point, but we are certainly now spoilt for choice when it comes to long-range EVs. In fact, we are so spoiled for choice that what we once considered a long-range car is quickly becoming mid-range as even longer-range cars come to market. The EV race today, though, well, that's more geared towards the electric pickup truck, with startups, established automakers, and of course, the EV leader Tesla, all vying to see who will be first to market. From Tesla's Cybertruck to the Lordstown Endurance, Ford's promised F-150 electric, and the insanely expensive handmade boutique Bollinger B2, everyone wants to be first. That race to see who will be first to market, who will dominate the market, and who will capture the imagination of buyers is hot. And when it comes to sheer reservation numbers, Tesla's winning with its futuristic angular Cybertruck. But when it comes to getting to market first, I think that honour is going to go to Rivian. And today, the same day that Rivian has announced yet another successful funding round of $2.65 billion US, I'm going to explain why Rivian is on a roll, why it's done everything right so far, and why I think it's going to win the electric pickup race. Let's start with the basics. Unlike many startups, which make a lot of noise about their vehicle years before actually having a functional vehicle to show the world, Rivian operated in stealth for nearly a decade without discussing what it was working on. Its founder, R.J. Scaringe, used that time to build a team of industry experts and to develop the underlying technology driving the R1T and R1S. In fact, Rivian already had a great vehicle when it burst cover at the LA Auto Show in 2018. By this point in its history, it had already gone through 3 different funding rounds, debt financing totaling $201.25 million, and it already got the basics of its vehicles well and truly tied down before anyone actually saw it. And it paid off. Having seen the vehicles for the first time at that event, I've got to say how well finished the R1T and R1S alpha prototypes looked. In fact, they looked better than a lot of cars that were debuted at the same show by legacy automakers as concepts or prototypes. That fit and finish and well-executed booth instantly made Rivian a must-visit at the LA show. That attracted additional investors, as well as interest from automotive journalists, large and small. But the other thing that Rivian did right at that very first LA Auto Show it attended was that it had engineers on site who were willing to talk about the vehicles. Engineers who hadn't been told to avoid tough questions or who were somehow neutered by an overcautious PR team. It had engineers who were able to answer all of the tough questions from auto journalists. And that again helped showcase Rivian as a real, viable automotive startup that not only had the vision but also the technological chops to take on the big boys. The other things I feel Rivian did well in its early days of public exposure was to be clear about who its customers were. Sure, it was the first serious plug-in pickup to debut, but it never wavered from its target market. Outdoor adventure enthusiasts who would probably drive the R1S or R1T to work in the city during the week, but who wanted to have fun with outdoor sports at the weekend. It wasn't a vision that took away market share from other automakers because nobody else was making or promising a truck that did what these vehicles promised. Essentially, Rivian found a market niche and carved itself a space, and it built vehicles around that vision. From the gear tunnel, perfectly designed for a surfboard, snowboard or skis, to the seating for 5, premium cabin trim, and just the right mix of tech and hard-wearing ruggedness, the R1T gave those with money an excuse to own a pickup without the usual liberal guilt that accompanies such a purchase. With its strong engineering team, Rivian took a leaf out of Tesla's book and found itself a great deal on a production facility, taking over the normal Illinois production line that had, for some time, been home to Mitsubishi's US market, iMEV EV. Just as Tesla saved a lot of money buying the former NUMMI production facility from Toyota and GM in Fremont, California, so too did Rivian save a bucket of money buying the former Mitsubishi plant for its base of operations. And because it had such a strong product before it even exited stealth, Rivian was perfectly positioned to get extra investment as it headed towards production. Granted, it originally promised, rather amusingly, that it would be in production by the end of 2019 or start of 2020. But that little timing estimate notwithstanding, its first funding round after exiting stealth was from Amazon, a company that not only single-handedly almost tripled Rivian's total investment to date, but laid the foundation for a partnership that would see Rivian develop a fully electric delivery vehicle for Amazon. A few months later, Ford jumped on board, putting in $500 million, followed 5 months later by Cox Automotive with $350 million. By the time Cox Automotive was on board with funding, Rivian had not only had some pretty influential names backing it, but also had 2 prototype R1Ts on the ultimate test drive, accompanying the Long Way Up team from South America back to Los Angeles. And that was a gamble. I mean, I can't think of many automakers who would send a prototype vehicle on a multi-thousand-mile trip across really difficult terrain with a film crew in tow. Yet the trip itself, as Rivian admitted in a recent video, taught it a lot about the vehicle, its capabilities, and most importantly, what needed to change between those early prototypes and the now production-intent vehicles that we see rolling off the production line in Illinois. In turn, that Long Way Up trip, a high-profile expedition by anyone's estimates, I'm pretty sure helped with future funding rounds. By the time T. Rowe Price led a $1.3 billion investment round that also included Ford, BlackRock and Amazon, the Long Way Up expedition had just about completed, and it showcased that Rivian had a viable and sellable vehicle. Its subsequent funding rounds, $2.5 billion in July last year, pushed its coffers further, and today's announcement, another $2.65 billion, means that I'm guessing Rivian is pretty much funded through until the R1T and R1S begin rolling off the production line this summer. That's a very different place to where Tesla was, for example, in its early days of the Roadster. And that's partly because Tesla was the first automaker to seriously go about making a competitor to an internal combustion engine vehicle that had the performance chops and specifications to wow. Rivian benefits from the experience and exposure of those who went before, but I should note, also the same investors that helped Tesla reach series production for the Model S. T. Rowe Price was one of Tesla's largest and earliest investors. The big difference about Rivian's investment haul, nearly $8 billion in 2 years, is that it's still a privately held company. It's not on the stock market and at this rate doesn't appear to need to be. And as Elon Musk has noted plenty in the past concerning Tesla's stock market position, Rivian doesn't have to waste time trying to keep Wall Street happy. It just has to keep its investors happy, and that translates to meeting goals, bringing both the R1T and R1S to market, and turning those reservations into confirmed sales. So far, it is doing just fine at that. After the R1S and R1T launch, maybe an IPO will follow, but with the level of backing and level of investment at this point, I'd suggest it will be a traditional IPO rather than a reverse merger, one that keeps Rivian and its investors to this point in complete control of the company's future. As to why it will win, right now it looks like Rivian will win the race to market. Tesla is still building its Gigafactory in Texas, and it's not looking like Tesla will have the Cybertruck into production before Rivian. But there's then the simple fact that while the Cybertruck has a lot of fans and is going to sell massively well, Rivian has the edge in so much that its vehicle is more conventional looking. And if there's anything that the market has taught us so far, it's that in the long term, conventional looking vehicles tend to do better than quirky designs. I don't necessarily mean that that's going to be bad for Tesla or that the Cybertruck will sell badly, because Tesla manages to break every rule. But of the people I've spoken to in the last 6 months or so who are keen on going off-road and doing adventure-type things in an EV, it's the R1T that gets mentioned every time, before the Cybertruck or indeed the Hummer. The Rivian R1T isn't so different that it's going to stand out, and it's not so crazy expensive and over the top that it's completely unaffordable for many, like the Hummer. And that's the one final thing. Rivian's brought down the price of the R1T in a market where cost is important. I think that's something a lot of people are overlooking. It's down to its investment thus far, the advances it's made, and the willingness to pass those savings on to customers. And in today's modern EV world, that's a very rare thing. That's it for today. As always, thanks to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month Patreons. That's John Lyons, Regine Fellows, Jeffrey Songster, Anonymous Freak, Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, and Tazla in the Gong. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. That's Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Sean Ueda, Will Graylin, and Ian. You can join all of these amazing Patreon supporters by becoming one yourself from following the links below, or you can use the links to send us a donation through Ko-fi or Bitcoin. You'll also find a link to our free Discord server, so sign up and come and join in the chatting fun. And if you're in need of some swag, don't forget to check out our merch over at Redbubble. After all of these names have finished scrolling, you will see a new suggestion for a video to watch, so please consider watching it if you haven't. I'll be back very soon. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!